Alright, for this edition of the Beggar's Bowl, we're going to do it as a video. We're going to see how this goes. Okay, so first of all, there's a principle I want to talk about today. And the principle has to do with, it's an economic principle. That's what I talk about in the Beggar's Bowl editions. And the principle is to spend spend far less money than what you make. So someone told me about this principle years ago, and it was something that I didn't understand. I knew was profound when he said it. It was a man I knew who always did well with money. He worked completely on a cash basis, running multiple businesses, multiple streams of income. Never went into debt, no partners, but funded everything himself. And the people who worked for him said he was extremely gifted with the way he did things with money, and he never took on a project that he didn't have all of the cash up front to deal with any and all expenses that might come about through the project. And he was a very honest and a good man. And so I asked him, what is it that is your secret to dealing with money, that you do so well with it? And he told me that he didn't know, which I wished he did know. I was hoping that he would say, well, let me give you a formula. But he's like, I don't know, I just always had a gift for it. And I was like, oh, bummer. But then he said, well, there is one thing. He says, I've always made it a point to spend far less than what I make. And he says, I see people spending money on things, and I realized as he said it, he kind of explained, and for him it was a matter of frugality, not a matter of making a lot of money. Of course, my reaction was like, how in the world do you do that? You know, that was my problem, was not being able to make more than what I spent. And what he said was to do whatever you have to do to make far more than what you spend, or to spend far less than what you make. I mean, like he said something about, if you have to move in with your parents, do whatever you have to do. He said, just, find a way to lower your expenses to the point where you're making far more than what or you're spending far less than what you make. And so I thought about that for years, and it never really came together for me, ever. And then I had an experience that changed that, and it's happened over the last it's over the last year and a half, I guess I'd say. Only I didn't know what I was doing. So here's the principle. I won't, without going into the details of my own story, is that from what I can tell, I mean, I don't know what a good figure is, but what I can almost imagine is like spending like a third of what you make, maybe a fourth of what you make. And that there has to be a reason. If you're like me, there has to be a compelling enough reason to not spend that amount of money that you're not spending. And for me, that was not, it wasn't my own benefit. If I had been saving up for a down payment on a house, I don't buy houses on credit anymore, but if I had been saving up for a vehicle or this or that, I know I couldn't have done it. But for me, it was like I had a little prompting that gave me a sacred reason to not spend a certain amount of money. And I made it, it was like a rule. It was like, no matter what happened, I was not going to spend this money. So that it was almost, you could say, a religious observance. And so it has to be something like that. The money that you're setting aside is not your money. It is sacred money, you might say. It's in preparation for the needs of somebody else who desperately needs that money. And I'm not really talking about charity here. I don't know exactly what to call it. But then you find the way to live on this little tiny bit of money. Now, what I can say, unless you make a whole lot of money, is that what you'll probably find is that you have to drastically change your life circumstances. That's why a lot of the things that I've talked about on here are important. It's like we're at a time where the world is reconsidering um, they're reconsidering housing. Um, if you look at the system of housing, the way that we do housing in, I was going to say America, but in the world, it's really kind of insane, and it's fraught with uh, there are people who are benefiting in. Um, the only way I can put it is it. If you look at it clearly, I think it's corrupt. So much corruption has entered into it that it is a very broken system. Only broken is almost too nice. If it hadn't been intended and planned, I think it's functioning perfectly for the people who designed it. But so in that sense, it's not broken to them. It works perfectly. But it you could say that it creates broken people. So there's that aspect, but then there's the aspect of there's so many reasons to change the way that we view housing, um, and um, and so um, I say all of this, and yet I find myself wondering if I find myself wondering if you may have to go through your own troubles to get to this point. Um, but at least you'll have heard the principle talked about, so that whenever your own time comes, you can it'll be there in the back of your mind. So we're 7 minutes. Better try to wrap it up. So the idea is that there's a certain amount of money that is becoming like sacred money, and usually you need a purpose, a reason why, like you couldn't imagine touching this money, and so this fits into quiet. This fits into the other principles, that economic principles, but when you begin to do this, and I think I have to touch on at least one other principle, and the other principle is this idea of being a provider. So there's this idea that you are providing for somebody else. And so even if you're single, the beginning of this idea is to begin to think of, it's like, this money is not my money. So it's like part of the reason that I think it's hard for people to save is that it's like if they have a conscience, they have a hard time justifying saving the money and not spending it. But there has to enter into your mind this idea that it is for somebody else besides myself. And one of the things that helps with that, we've talked about, going low. So going low fits with this as well. So it's like, I'm going to live in the simplest way possible. I'm going to live on this tiny pittance. Like there's people, I've met many of them out in the desert who are living on $600 a month Social Security, and some of them less. A friend of mine he has just his veteran benefits, which was $400 and something a month, and that's what he lived on every month. And so that this goes into another principle, which we'll talk about another time, which is deciding that you're poor before you're poor. So you're deciding that you're poor before you're poor, and you're living that way. So you're living this extremely simple lifestyle. And if you have a family, it's a hard thing to grasp. but it's something that you have to grasp, even all the more, because now you have, not just the people who you're going to help support outside your own family, but your own family to support before you do that. So the family has to begin to live on, a quarter, a third of what the family is actually bringing in. So it's like choosing poverty early. And so you're choosing poverty, you're choosing not to spend everything that you earn, and then you do what you have to do, and then you wait until there is a prompting from the unseen world, a clarity on who that money is for. So it's not your money, the money that's kind of going into the savings account, going into the the locker underneath the bed or whatever. And you're waiting to know where it's supposed to go. And inevitably, and one of the things that helps with this too is to think even of the people that you support as someone besides yourself. So, like I'm helping to support this child of mine, but but how do I put this? It's like the money may be for that child, but you're waiting to find out if that's the case. And so there comes this point where motorcycles going by. There comes this point where there's a clear knowing about where the money is to be spent. And now the money becomes like an investment. Many different types of investments. An investment, when you know you're supposed to give it to somebody in need, that's an investment. Because the unseen world sees that and rewards that. So you need to have like luck on your side, you could say. So it may be that you're supposed to spend it on an investment. It may be that you're told to invest it in your own education. So the time comes and you feel to put the money towards taking a class, towards doing something that will increase your income and help you to better provide. Or even just increase your joy, and which has its own blessings that it brings. Or you may feel impressed to provide. So maybe you've been living in a very simple housing arrangement, a tiny house, a trailer, a van, whatever. And now you have this impression, okay, that you're now going to buy a tiny house, a trailer, a van for somebody who you love, who's close to you. And so it becomes this investment again. And sometimes this can be members of your own family. But then you invest. You do something that's going to make it easier for the few in the future. So, and that's always going to come in the form of thinking about others. Okay? So this is sacred money. Okay? This is sacred money being put aside for the benefit of people whom you love. So this is sacred money being put aside for the benefit of people that you love. And the person that directs the use of those funds is God. So that's the principle. I wanted to share that today. And I hope that that's helpful. If you're like me, it'll take some sort of a miracle for you to get it. Because of the way I was raised, I couldn't get it for the longest time, but I finally get it, and I am like sold. It's like, oh my gosh, if I would have understood this years ago. Things could have been very different. So, but God's good. He doesn't forget us, especially when we keep seeking for the answers. So what is the principle of today on the Beggar's Bowl? The principle is spend far less than what you make. Far less. Like 10% ain't anywhere close. My desire is, if I could do it all the time, I would spend a third or a fourth of what I make. And I would wait until I knew what to do with that sacred money that sacred money that's going to be invested and turned around eventually to bless the people that I love. Okay. All right. And one thing to clarify with this, so there's a sense in which, like I said, this isn't really quite charity. The idea is that, it's more holistic than that. It's not just giving money away. Okay, it's like it's like kind of a it comes out of the unseen realm, the knowledge of how to handle it, and it's not really the same as the way we've thought about it. Most of the time when we give to charity, we say we set aside 10% of our income for charity, and we give it out there, and there's no thought, there's no learning, there's no increased ability to give more in the future. It's just like a check written out. This is so different than that. And I hope that I hope I've conveyed it correctly, and we'll probably talk about it more in the future. All right, so last thing. So this is where I beg. Every week I ask for something. There'll be links in the description where if you decide to donate to the channel, you can do that. But the one way in which I wanted to ask for help this week is if you could right now, we'll just take like 30 seconds and do it. If you can just imagine this, if you can just take a moment and imagine this work that I'm doing opening up and something coming out of the unseen realm that will bless these things that we're talking about, these words that I'm speaking, the writing that I'm doing, opening up so that those who are supposed to see it begin to see it. It's like I picture almost like my heart opening wide. If you can imagine that too with me. Heart opening wide to receive those, for unseen things to happen, so as for this work to move forward in the way that is intended. And I would thank you if any of you have done that with me just now. And of course, all in divine timing. But I think that's more important than any money that you could send me or anything like that. I've been thinking more in those terms lately. I think that'll all come according to what God wants in His own timing. But I find myself desiring that to have people be able to connect with these ideas. And I would say to share this, but really deeper than that things happen naturally for this to open up in the way that's intended. And so I guess what I'm asking for, right, as I realize as I say this, is I'm asking for a prayer. So God bless you all. Thanks for listening.